Amara Johnson believed in the quiet power of light, not the harsh, unforgiving glare of the midday sun, but the gentle, determined glow of the single lamp on her desk. It was an old thing, a relic from a thrift store, its brass base tarnished and its shade slightly crooked. Yet every night, it waged a silent war against the encroaching darkness of her small third-floor apartment. And every night, it won. Its small circle of yellow was her world, a sanctuary carved out of the shadows where equations danced and historical timelines unfurled. The apartment itself was a collection of weary sighs. The paint on the walls, once a cheerful cream, had surrendered to a network of hairline cracks and faint, ghostly water stains. The windows rattled a mournful percussion when the wind blew, a constant reminder of their thinness against the world outside. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed a tune of constant effort, its contents a sparse landscape of milk, a few eggs, and the Tupperware of leftover rice that had to stretch for 2 more meals. This was the geography of her life, a map of limitations. But within the lamplight's reach, Amara was limitless. She was a physicist, calculating the escape velocity of a rocket, a poet wrestling with iambic pentameter, a historian walking the cobblestones of ancient Rome. Her textbooks were secondhand, their pages soft with the touch of 100 other hands, their margins filled with the ghosts of other people's notes. Amara didn't mind. She saw it as a conversation across time, a chorus of learners all reaching for the same truths. Her own notes, written in a script so precise it looked like a typeface, filled every available space, a testament to a mind that refused to be contained by its surroundings. She was not alone in this small world. In the other room, her younger sister, Lila, slept. At 8 years old, Lila was a supernova of energy and questions during the day, but in sleep, she was perfectly still, a small, trusting form beneath a threadbare quilt. Amara was her moon, her constant, her guardian. Their parents were gone, taken 2 years prior in a symphony of screeching tires and shattering glass that still echoed in Amara's quietest moments. They had left behind a void, an ache that never fully subsided, and 2 daughters who had to learn to be a family of 2. The weight of that responsibility settled on Amara's shoulders every morning when she woke up before dawn. It was in the careful way she measured out the oatmeal, ensuring Lila had enough. It was in the hours she spent after school at the diner, her feet aching and her hair smelling of grease, turning shouted orders into rent money. It was in the ferocity of her late-night studies, the burning belief that education was not just a path for herself, but a lifeline for them both. Her dream had a name, 4 letters that felt like a prayer on her tongue. MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It was an audacious dream for a girl from her side of town, a place where dreams were often practical, scaled-down things meant to survive the harsh realities of life. But Amara's dream was a star, distant and brilliant, and she had spent 4 years of high school building a telescope of grades, test scores, and extracurriculars powerful enough to bring it into focus. She was the valedictorian. Her SAT scores were a breathtaking constellation of near perfection. She had won the state science fair with a project on quantum entanglement she'd built with scrap parts from a junkyard. On paper, she was a perfect candidate. But life was not lived on paper. Tonight, a new anxiety gnawed at the edges of her concentration. The final piece of her application puzzle was a signature. A single looping scrawl from her school's guidance counselor, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, on the financial aid and scholarship recommendation form. It was the last gate, and Mrs. Vance was the gatekeeper. Amara pushed the thought away and focused on the problem in front of her. A complex differential equation. She let the numbers flow, the logic a soothing balm. For a little while, in the quiet hum of the old refrigerator and the steady glow of her lamp, she could forget the rattling windows, the empty cupboards, and the formidable woman she had to face in the morning. She could simply be brilliant. Her grandmother, before she passed, had given her a small, smooth stone. "Kindness," she had said, her voice warm and raspy like old velvet, "is a currency that never loses its value, Amara. You can be poor in dollars, but always be rich in heart." Amara kept that stone in her pocket. It was a physical reminder of her true inheritance, a wealth that no hardship could touch. She held on to that thought as she finally turned off the lamp, letting the darkness reclaim its territory for a few precious hours, the promise of dawn and the challenge of the day ahead waiting for her. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp pavement and exhaust fumes. Amara walked the 12 blocks to school, her worn sneakers a familiar rhythm against the cracked sidewalk. She had already been up for hours, making breakfast for Lila, quizzing her on spelling words while they ate, and walking her to the elementary school before starting her own journey. Her stomach was a hollow drum. She'd given Lila the last of the eggs and told her she wasn't hungry, a lie that had become a familiar, bitter taste in her mouth. In her backpack, nestled in a protective folder, was her future, the MIT application, the essays she had rewritten a dozen times, the glowing letters of recommendation from her physics and math teachers, and the final, crucial form, the Finch Innovation Scholarship. It was a full ride, a legendary award given to one student in the country each year, a scholarship that favored not just genius, but character. The signature of a guidance counselor was a mandatory component, a stamp of institutional approval. As she neared a small, neglected park a few blocks from the high school, she saw a commotion, or rather, the lack of one. An elderly man was crumpled on a bench, his body slumped at an awkward angle. He was dressed in shabby, mismatched clothes, a faded flannel shirt, worn corduroy trousers, and a grimy trench coat despite the mild weather. A small crowd of students and adults on their way to work flowed around him like a river around a rock, their gazes averted, their pace quickening. Whispers drifted on the air. "Probably drunk. Just another homeless guy. Don't get involved. It's not our problem." A man in a business suit actively steered his son around the bench, a look of distaste pinching his features. Amara stopped. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Be rich in heart. Her appointment with Mrs. Vance was in 30 minutes. It was the most important meeting of her life. She couldn't afford to be late. Mrs. Vance was notoriously punctual and unforgiving of tardiness, especially from students like her. But the man on the bench let out a soft groan, a sound of genuine pain that cut through the morning indifference. Amara's feet, which had been urging her forward, froze. She looked at the man, then at the stream of people ignoring him. She felt a familiar pang of frustration. How easy it was for people to look away, to decide someone wasn't worthy of their time, their concern, their basic human decency. She took a deep breath. Her decision was made before she was even conscious of it. She broke away from the current of the crowd and walked toward the bench. Kneeling down, she spoke softly. "Sir, are you all right?" The man's eyes fluttered open. They were a startlingly clear blue, clouded with confusion and pain. He tried to speak, but only a dry, rasping sound came out. His skin was pale and clammy. This wasn't drunkenness. This was something else. I think I just need a moment, he whispered, his voice weak. My sugar dropped. He was diabetic. Amara recognized the signs from a health class. He needed sugar, and quickly. She looked in her bag. She had nothing. Her lunch money for the week, a precious $10 bill she had earned from an extra shift, was tucked into a small pocket in her wallet. It was meant for 5 days of the cheapest cafeteria sandwiches. It was her entire food budget. Without a second thought, she pulled it out. "Stay right here," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'll be right back." She ran to the corner bodega, the bell on the door jingling frantically as she burst in. "A bottle of orange juice and a candy bar," she gasped, placing the $10 bill on the counter. The clerk, a man she saw every day, raised an eyebrow but took the money. She grabbed the items and ran back, her heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and anxiety about the time. She helped the man sit up, unscrewed the cap of the juice, and held it to his lips. He drank slowly at first, then more eagerly. She unwrapped the chocolate bar and broke off a piece. "Here, eat this. It will help." He chewed weakly, the color slowly starting to return to his face. He looked at her, his clear blue eyes focusing now, filled with a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you, young lady, thank you. You didn't have to do that." "Everyone deserves a little help," Amara said, repeating another of her grandmother's maxims. She glanced at her watch. She was now 10 minutes late. A cold dread washed over her. Mrs. Vance was going to be furious. I caused you to be late for something, didn't I?" the man asked, his voice stronger now. He had an educated, refined way of speaking that seemed at odds with his disheveled appearance. "It's okay," Amara lied, forcing a smile. "It's just school." "What is your name?" he asked. Amara Johnson." "Amara," he repeated, the name sounding significant on his lips. "I'm Alistair. Thank you, Amara. I won't forget this." She helped him to his feet, ensuring he was steady. He insisted he was fine now, that he lived nearby and could make his way home. Reluctantly, she left him, breaking into a run, the folder in her backpack feeling heavier with every step. She arrived at the school's main office, breathless and 15 minutes late, her hair disheveled from the run, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The school secretary gave her a disapproving frown. "Mrs. Vance is with another student," the secretary said coolly. "You'll have to wait." Amara's heart sank. She had made a choice. She had chosen kindness over punctuality. She had spent her last dollar on a stranger, and as she sat on the hard bench outside the guidance counselor's office, she prayed it hadn't just cost her everything. The door to Mrs. Vance's office was a slab of dark, imposing wood, a barrier between the noisy hallway and the hushed, carpeted world where futures were supposedly shaped. Amara could hear the murmur of voices from within, a low, confident tone, and then Mrs. Vance's higher-pitched, sycophantic laughter. Each peal of that laughter felt like a small stone being dropped into the pit of Amara's stomach. Waiting was an art form in this school, one Amara had mastered. She had waited for teachers to finish conversations before she could ask a question. She had waited for lab equipment to be free. She had waited for the bus in the pouring rain. But this wait was different. It was charged with a suffocating tension. Her entire future was on the other side of that door, held captive by a woman who saw her as little more than a statistic, a box to be checked on a demographic form. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door swung open. A boy named Chad Morgan swaggered out, his Letterman jacket practically glowing with privilege. He was the quarterback of the football team, his father a prominent lawyer. Behind him was his mother, a woman sculpted by wealth and entitlement, her perfume leaving a suffocating trail in the air. "Thank you again, Eleanor," Mrs. Morgan said, calling the counselor by her first name. "We're just so thrilled about the early acceptance to state. It's a wonderful safety school, of course, before we hear back from the Ivies." "Of course, Catherine," Mrs. Vance beamed, her smile wide and painfully bright. "Chad is an exceptional young man. It was my pleasure to write his recommendation. The sky's the limit for him." Mrs. Vance's eyes, full of warmth and admiration for the Morgans, swept past them and landed on Amara. The warmth vanished instantly, replaced by a glacial frost. Her smile tightened into a thin, disapproving line. "Amara, you're late," she said, her voice clipped. "My schedule is extremely tight." "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Vance," Amara began. "There was an—" "Save it," Mrs. Vance cut her off, gesturing dismissively toward the chair in front of her desk. "Come in. Let's get this over with." The Morgans lingered by the door, watching with undisguised curiosity. Amara felt their eyes on her back as she walked into the office, the feeling of being an insect under a microscope. The office was Mrs. Vance's shrine to herself. The walls were covered in framed photos of her with local politicians, her diploma from a prestigious university, and a series of Counselor of the Year awards from a decade ago. The desk was a vast expanse of polished mahogany, neat and sterile, a reflection of the woman who sat behind it. Amara sat on the edge of the chair, her posture straight, her hands clutching the folder in her lap. She felt small, out of place, a weed in a meticulously manicured garden. "Now," Mrs. Vance said, leaning back in her plush leather chair and steepling her fingers. "What is this urgent matter?" "It's the scholarship form, Mrs. Vance," Amara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The Finch Innovation Scholarship. The deadline to submit is tomorrow. I just need your signature on the counselor verification page." She slid the folder across the gleaming desk. Mrs. Vance didn't touch it immediately. She stared at it as if it were something distasteful. Then, with a theatrical sigh, she opened it. Her eyes scanned the first page, which clearly stated Amara's intended institution, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A small, sharp laugh escaped Mrs. Vance's lips. It was not a sound of amusement. It was a sound of ridicule. "MIT," she said, the words dripping with condescension. She looked up at Amara, her eyes cold and pitying. "Oh, Amara, let's be realistic." Realistic was the word. It was the weapon Mrs. Vance wielded to crush the dreams of students she deemed unworthy. It was a cage disguised as a kindness. "My grades, my test scores, they're all—" Amara started, but was cut off again. "Your scores are very good for a student in your circumstances," Mrs. Vance said, the qualifier hanging in the air like poison. "But MIT is another world. It's for students with generations of advantages, with extensive resources for tutoring, for enrichment programs. It's not for, well, it's not a practical goal for you." Mrs. Morgan, still standing in the doorway, nodded in agreement, a smug little smile playing on her lips. Chad snickered softly. The humiliation was no longer private. It was a performance, and Amara was the unwilling star. I believe I have a very good chance," Amara insisted, her voice quiet but firm. "My physics teacher, Mr. Harris, he wrote me a letter of recommendation. He thinks my science fair project was on par with graduate-level work." Mr. Harris is a lovely man, but he's a high school teacher, not an MIT admissions officer, Mrs. Vance retorted, her tone sharp. He doesn't understand the realities. I do. My job, Amara, is not to encourage flights of fancy. It's to guide you toward an achievable outcome. Wasting an application on a school like MIT is not just a waste of your time. It's a waste of the school's resources. She pushed the folder back across the desk toward Amara, a gesture of finality. Then, she opened a drawer and pulled out a glossy, tri-fold pamphlet. She slid it across the desk. On the front, in bold, friendly letters, were the words, Northwood Community College. Your future starts here. This, Mrs. Vance said, tapping the pamphlet with a perfectly manicured finger, is a realistic path. It's local. It's affordable. You can get a certificate in a practical field. Dental hygiene, perhaps. Or office administration. These are good, stable jobs. It's a much better fit for a girl like you. A girl like you. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A girl from the poor side of town. A girl without parents. A black girl. Mrs. Vance didn't need to say the words aloud. The meaning was clear. Tears pricked at Amara's eyes, hot and sharp. She fought them back, refusing to give Mrs. Vance the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She lifted her chin, her gaze unwavering. I am not going to community college, she said, her voice shaking but filled with a steely resolve she didn't know she possessed. I have worked for 4 years for this. I have earned this chance. All I am asking for is your signature on a form. Mrs. Vance's face hardened, her feigned concern evaporating to reveal the raw prejudice beneath. And I am telling you no, she snapped, her voice rising. I will not put my professional name and the school's reputation on an application that is frankly laughable. You are being difficult and unrealistic. I am trying to help you, and you are throwing it back in my face. She stood up, her authority absolute in that small room. My decision is final. I will sign your application to Northwood. I will not sign it for MIT. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have appointments with students who are serious about their futures. The dismissal was total. The humiliation was complete. In front of the smirking mother and son, she had been reduced to a laughable fantasy, her hard work and brilliance dismissed as nothing. She felt a profound sense of powerlessness, a cold, crushing weight, the world she had built within the lamplight, the world where she was limitless, had just collided with the real world, a world full of doors slammed shut. She slowly reached for her folder, her dreams feeling like dead weight in her hands. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock on the wall, each tick a second of her future draining away. This was it. This was how it ended. Not with a rejection letter, but with a condescending laugh and a pamphlet for community college. Just as she was about to stand up and leave, a soft knock came from the office door. It was a gentle, almost hesitant sound, but in the charged silence of the room, it landed like a thunderclap. Mrs. Vance, annoyed by the interruption, called out, "I'm in a meeting. Come back later." The door opened anyway. Standing in the doorway was the man from the park. Alistair. But he was transformed. The grimy trench coat and faded flannel were gone, replaced by an exquisitely tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Amara's rent for a year. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His white hair was neatly combed, and the clear blue eyes that had been clouded with pain were now sharp, intelligent, and radiating an aura of quiet, immense power. He was not a homeless man. He was someone else entirely. Behind him, looking flustered and apologetic, were the school principal, Mr. Thompson, and the district superintendent, Dr. Albright. They looked like nervous sheep herding a lion. "Eleanor, I am so sorry to interrupt," Principal Thompson stammered, wringing his hands. "But this is Dr. Alistair Finch. He insisted on seeing you." The name hit the room like a physical force. Finch, as in the Finch Innovation Scholarship. Mrs. Vance's jaw went slack. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty, grayish pallor. Her eyes darted from the man, now standing tall and imposing in her doorway, to the scholarship form on her desk. His name printed in elegant script at the very top. The connection sparked in her brain with the violence of a lightning strike. "Dr. Finch?" she whispered, her voice a strangled croak. The benefactor?" "The very same," Dr. Finch said, his voice calm and level, yet carrying an unmistakable edge of steel. He stepped fully into the room, his gaze sweeping over the scene. Mrs. Vance behind her mahogany fortress, the smug Morgans frozen by the door, and Amara sitting small and defeated in the visitor's chair. His eyes, when they met Amara's, held a flicker of warmth and recognition before turning back to the counselor. "Well, I must apologize for my appearance earlier this morning, Mrs. Vance," he began, his tone deceptively polite. "I find that dressing down, so to speak, offers a unique perspective. It allows one to see the true character of a community, to see who offers help and who walks on by." The implication was clear. Every person in the room understood. He hadn't just been a man in need. He had been conducting a test of character. Mrs. Vance began to tremble. A thin sheen of sweat appeared on her forehead. I don't understand," she stammered, her mind clearly racing, trying to find an escape from the trap that was closing around her. "Oh, I think you do, Doctor," Finch said, his voice losing its polite veneer and taking on a chilling seriousness. "I established the Finch Innovation Scholarship for one purpose: to find the next generation of brilliant minds, yes, but more importantly, to find young people of unimpeachable character. People who lead with kindness and integrity. I was in the area to personally and anonymously observe our finalists. Imagine my surprise when I collapsed from a hypoglycemic episode this morning, and out of dozens of people, only one person stopped to help." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the suffocating silence. He looked directly at Amara. One young woman, who was clearly in a hurry, spent her last $10 to buy a stranger juice and a candy bar. She showed compassion when it was inconvenient. She showed grace when others showed indifference. "That young woman," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "is Amara Johnson." He then turned his laser-like focus back to Mrs. Vance, who looked as if she might faint. "And imagine my profound disappointment," he continued, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl, "when I arrive at this school to congratulate her, only to overhear the gatekeeper of her future telling her that her dreams are laughable, that she is unrealistic, that a girl like her should settle for a life of mediocrity." Mrs. Vance opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked desperately toward the principal and superintendent for help, but they stood frozen, their faces masks of horror. They knew exactly who Dr. Alistair Finch was. He wasn't just a benefactor. He was a titan of industry, a reclusive billionaire whose philanthropic foundation was responsible for funding half the district's STEM programs. His word was law. I was only trying to offer practical advice," Mrs. Vance finally managed to squeak out, her voice high and thin. I was counseling her based on the realities of her situation. I had her best interests at heart. Her best interests? Dr. Finch repeated, taking a slow step toward the desk. He picked up the community college pamphlet and held it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a piece of garbage. You call this her best interest? To crush the ambition of a student with a 4.0 GPA, a 1580 SAT score, and a science project that has been praised by my own research team at Finch Aeronautics? You call it guidance to tell a young woman of her caliber that she should be a dental hygienist instead of a quantum physicist? He tossed the pamphlet onto the desk. It landed with a soft, damning flutter. No, Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice cold and final. That is not guidance. That is prejudice. That is the lazy, cruel bigotry of a person who judges others not by the content of their character or the power of their mind, but by their zip code and the color of their skin. You are not a counselor. You are a dream killer. And you have done it for the last time. The collapse was instantaneous and total. The arrogant, condescending woman who had held Amara's future in her hands just moments before crumpled. The mask of authority fell away, revealing a panicked, pleading coward. Her knees seemed to buckle, and she sank back into her chair, her face a mess of disbelief and terror. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had been utterly and seismically inverted. Amara, who had been the powerless victim, was now the center of it all, the vindicated hero of a story she hadn't even known was being written. The world, it turned out, was watching after all. The superintendent, Dr. Albright, a man whose political sensibilities were as sharp as a razor, finally snapped out of his paralysis. He saw his district's largest benefactor, a man who could fund or defund their entire future with a single phone call, standing there, radiating righteous fury. He saw the object of that fury, a counselor whose blatant prejudice had just been laid bare. And he saw the student at the center of it all, Amara Johnson, a symbol of everything his schools were supposed to champion. The calculation was simple and brutal. Dr. Albright stepped forward, his face a grim mask of professional outrage. He bypassed Mrs. Vance entirely and addressed Dr. Finch directly. Dr. Finch, on behalf of the Northwood School District, I am appalled, utterly appalled. This is not what we stand for. This is not who we are. He then turned to Mrs. Vance, and his voice, which had been placating, became hard as granite. Eleanor, he said, the use of her first name no longer a sign of collegiality, but of condemnation. Pack your personal belongings. Your employment with the Northwood School District is terminated, effective immediately. A strangled gasp escaped Mrs. Vance's throat. What? You can't! I have tenure! She cried, her voice cracking with desperation. Consider it revoked, Dr. Albright snapped, his patience gone. Your actions today are a profound violation of our educational mandate and our code of conduct. You have actively worked against the best interests of a student, and you have brought shame upon this institution in front of one of our most honored partners. You are a disgrace. A security guard will escort you from the premises. Principal Thompson, finally finding his voice, nodded vigorously. I'll call security right now. He backed out of the room, already pulling out his phone. The Morgans, who had been silent spectators to the entire implosion, began to edge toward the door. Mrs. Morgan's face was pale, her earlier smugness replaced with a look of dawning horror as she realized they had been complicit witnesses and silent supporters of the behavior that had just cost a woman her career. She grabbed her son's arm and practically dragged him out of the office, eager to escape the blast radius. Now, it was just Amara, Dr. Finch, Dr. Albright, and the ruined woman behind the desk. Mrs. Vance buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with dry, pathetic sobs. There was no dignity in her defeat, only the raw, ugly spectacle of arrogance brought low. It was not a sight that brought Amara joy, only a profound, weary sadness. Dr. Finch walked over to Amara. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Amara," he said, his voice now soft and kind. "Sometimes the world needs a reminder of what truly matters." He then turned to Dr. Albright. "Superintendent, I trust you will find a replacement for Mrs. Vance who understands that the primary duty of a counselor is to build bridges to opportunity, not to erect walls of prejudice." "Absolutely, Dr. Finch," Dr. Albright said, nodding emphatically. "We will begin a search immediately, and we will ensure that every student in this district receives the support they deserve." Dr. Finch then looked down at the folder still sitting on Mrs. Vance's desk. He picked it up, opened it to the verification page, and pulled a beautiful, heavy fountain pen from his jacket pocket. "The Finch Innovation Scholarship no longer requires a counselor's signature," he declared, his voice resonating with absolute authority. "As the chairman of the selection committee, I have the power to waive certain requirements. In this case, however, I would like to add an endorsement." With a few swift, elegant strokes, he wrote something at the bottom of the page. Then he signed his name, Alistair Finch. He turned the form around for Amara to see. Below the space for the counselor's signature, in bold, confident script, he had written, "Ms. Amara Johnson is not only the most brilliant applicant we have seen in a decade, but she is also a person of the highest moral character. She is the embodiment of everything this scholarship stands for. It is my distinct honor to personally welcome her to the Finch Scholars Program." He handed the folder to Amara. Her hands were shaking as she took it. It was real. It was all real. The humiliation, the fear, the despair of just minutes ago was being washed away by a tidal wave of shock and vindication. Dr. Finch wasn't finished. He looked at Amara, a warm, grandfatherly smile on his face. "Young lady, I believe you have something to say." He gestured slightly toward Mrs. Vance, who was now staring at them with wide, tear-filled eyes. Amara looked at the woman who had tried to shatter her dreams. She could have said 1,000 things. She could have been angry, vengeful, triumphant. But as she stood there, empowered and vindicated, she felt none of those things. She only felt the truth of her grandmother's words, "Be rich in heart." She took a deep breath and spoke, her voice clear and strong, filling the once oppressive office with a newfound grace. "You were wrong about me, Mrs. Vance," she said, not with anger, but with a simple, powerful certainty. "You were wrong to judge me. You don't know what I'm capable of. You don't know how hard I've worked. My circumstances don't define my potential. No one's circumstances do. I hope one day you learn to see people for who they are, not for what you assume them to be." It was not a speech of vengeance, but of principle. It was a declaration of her own worth, and a quiet lesson for the woman who had so profoundly failed to see it. It was the final, definitive act of the public reckoning, delivered not with a shout, but with the unshakable power of dignity. The arrival of 2 uniformed security guards signaled the final, ignominious end of Eleanor Vance's career. They stood impassively at the door, their presence a stark, physical manifestation of her fall from grace. She looked up, her face streaked with tears and makeup, a portrait of utter devastation. The authority she had wielded with such casual cruelty was gone, leaving only a hollow shell. Dr. Finch, his purpose in the office fulfilled, turned his full attention to Amara. The stern, commanding presence he had shown Mrs. Vance melted away, replaced by a genuine, paternal warmth. "Amara," he said, his voice gentle, "the scholarship is just the beginning. It covers your full tuition, room, board, and books at MIT. It also includes a generous annual stipend for personal expenses and research materials. You will want for nothing." Amara could only nod. The words stuck in her throat. The sheer magnitude of it was overwhelming. The crushing weight of financial worry, a burden she had carried for so long it felt like a part of her, was simply gone. "But we need to address a few more immediate matters," he continued, pulling out his phone. He typed a quick message. "I have a personal assistant, Michael, who is something of a miracle worker. I've just instructed him to pay off any and all outstanding bills associated with your address. Your electricity, your rent. Consider it all handled. He will also be arranging for a full delivery of groceries to your apartment this afternoon. You and your sister should have a celebratory feast tonight." Tears, which she had so fiercely held back in the face of humiliation, now streamed freely down Amara's cheeks. But these were not tears of pain. They were tears of disbelief, of relief so profound it felt like a physical release. "I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Thank you. I can't. Thank you isn't a big enough word." "Nonsense, Doctor," Finch said with a wave of his hand. "Kindness is a currency that never loses its value, Amara. You invested in me this morning on that bench. I am simply offering you a return on that investment. A significant one, I'll admit," he added with a twinkle in his eye. He wasn't done. "Furthermore," he said, "I am establishing a trust in your sister Lila's name. It will cover her entire education, from now through any graduate degree she chooses to pursue. You will never have to worry about her future. Your only job is to focus on your own brilliant one." This new generosity was too much to comprehend. A future for Lila, a secure, worry-free path for the little girl who was her whole world. That was a gift beyond anything she could have ever dreamed. She finally found her voice. "Why? Why are you doing all of this for me?" "Doctor," Finch looked at her, his expression serious once more. "Because the world is full of people like Eleanor Vance," he said quietly. "People who are quick to judge, quick to dismiss, quick to build walls. The world needs more people like you, Amara. People who are quick to help, quick to see the humanity in others, quick to build bridges. My foundation doesn't just invest in science and technology. We invest in people. And you, my dear, are one of the best investments I have ever made." As the security guards gently but firmly escorted a sobbing Mrs. Vance out of the office, Dr. Albright cleared his throat. "Amara," he said, his tone deeply respectful, "I am so profoundly sorry for what you endured. This school failed you today. I failed you. I promise you, we will do better." The vindication was absolute. The rewards were spectacular, life-altering, a fairy tale ending to a nightmare of a morning. Amara clutched the folder to her chest, the weight of it no longer a burden, but an anchor in the dizzying sea of her new reality. She was going to MIT. Her sister was taken care of. Her bills were paid. She had not only overcome the obstacle, she had been given the keys to a whole new world. And it had all started not with an equation or a perfect test score, but with a simple act of kindness on a park bench, a choice to be rich in heart when she was poor in everything else. The news of what had happened in the guidance counselor's office spread through Northwood High like wildfire. By lunchtime, the story had taken on legendary proportions. Amara Johnson, the quiet, brilliant girl from the poor side of town, had been revealed as the chosen one of a secret billionaire. The despised Mrs. Vance had been fired on the spot. It was a drama of such epic scope that it eclipsed all other school gossip. When Amara walked into the cafeteria, a hush fell over the room. Heads turned, people pointed. For the first time, she was not invisible. She was the center of attention, and for once, the stares were not of pity or disdain, but of awe and respect. A few students even broke into spontaneous applause. It was surreal, uncomfortable, but also deeply validating. The aftermath for Eleanor Vance was swift and total. Her firing was immediate and non-negotiable. The story leaked to the local news, framed as a heroic billionaire rewarding a kind student and ousting a prejudiced administrator. Her name became synonymous with petty tyranny and bigotry. She was professionally ruined, a pariah in the educational community she had lorded over for so long. Rumors circulated that her husband, embarrassed by the public scandal, had filed for divorce. Her meticulously constructed world had been completely and irrevocably dismantled. Justice, in this case, had not been blind. It had been surgically precise. 1 year later, the chill of a Cambridge autumn was a stark contrast to the life Amara had once known. She walked across the manicured lawns of the MIT campus, a stack of books tucked under her arm, feeling not like an intruder, but like she belonged. The imposter syndrome she had feared had never materialized. She had thrown herself into her studies with the same ferocity she had shown in her small apartment. But now, she was surrounded by peers who challenged her and professors who celebrated her. She was not just surviving, she was thriving. True to his word, Dr. Finch had become her mentor and grandfather figure. They had dinner once a month, where they would discuss everything from quantum mechanics to the state of the world. With his guidance, Amara was already working as a research assistant in one of the university's most advanced physics labs. But the changes went far beyond her own life. Dr. Finch, inspired by her story, had established a new national program through his foundation, the Amara Johnson Initiative. It provided funding to under-resourced high schools to hire dedicated, equity-focused college counselors. Its mission was to find and champion brilliant students from disadvantaged backgrounds, ensuring that no Amara Johnson would ever again be told to be realistic. Her old high school was the first recipient of the grant, and a new guidance department dedicated to possibility had been built in the place of Mrs. Vance's old, toxic regime. Lila was thriving too. Free from the constant stress of poverty, she was excelling in school, her natural curiosity and brightness now fully unleashed. She was taking piano lessons and had joined a soccer team. Amara flew her out to Boston for holidays, showing her the labs and museums, planting the seeds of her own big dreams. Their small family of 2 was no longer just surviving. They were building a future. One crisp afternoon, as Amara was leaving a coffee shop near campus, she saw a young student sitting on a bench, her head in her hands, looking utterly defeated. A textbook lay open on her lap, but she was staring blankly at the page. Amara recognized the look. It was the face of being overwhelmed, of feeling like you weren't smart enough, good enough, that you didn't belong. Amara hesitated for only a moment. Then she walked over and sat down beside the student. "Tough day?" she asked gently. The young woman looked up, startled. "Yeah," she mumbled. "This quantum computing class is going to be the end of me. I don't think I'm cut out for this." I felt that way my first semester, Amara said with a warm smile. All the time. She pointed to a specific diagram in the book. That part is tricky. It helped me to think of it like this. She spent the next 20 minutes explaining the concept, breaking it down in a way that was simple and clear. The student's face slowly transformed from despair to understanding, and finally, to dawning excitement. Wow, the student said, looking at Amara with gratitude. I've been staring at that for 3 days. You made it make sense in 20 minutes. Thank you so much. No problem, Amara said, standing up to leave. We all need a little help sometimes. As she walked away, she reached into her pocket and touched the smooth, familiar surface of the stone her grandmother had given her so long ago. She had been given a new life, a world of opportunity she could never have imagined. But the core of who she was, the inheritance of her grandmother's wisdom, remained unchanged. Kindness was still her truest currency, and she was determined to spend the rest of her life being impossibly, fabulously rich. Have you ever been judged unfairly? Have you ever had someone in a position of power try to tell you what you are and are not capable of? Amara's story is a reminder that the world is full of gatekeepers, people who will try to limit your potential based on their own narrow prejudices. But it is also a reminder that your worth is not determined by their opinion. It is determined by your character, your resilience, and your refusal to let anyone else write your story. The most powerful force in the universe is not found in a laboratory or an equation. It is found in the human heart, in the simple, world-changing choice to be kind. So go out and be someone's hero. You never know whose life you might change.